When it comes to fertilizing orchids, we usually think of only one method, and that is dissolving the orchid fertilizer in water. But actually, there are 5 different ways to fertilize orchids, and in this video, I'll show you how. Before I go into explaining each one separately, I do want to say loud and clear, I am not being sponsored by any of these. They don't even know I'm doing a review about their products. And yes, 3 of the 5 that are here are from the same company. That's just because that's what I found accessible and what is close to me, because I just had to say that. So let's get into the first one. The first method is going to be dissolved in water. So in this pot, which is 8 ounces or 226 grams, you're going to get the fertilizer, and it comes with a little teaspoon. The teaspoon that they give you is incredibly large. I mean, you wouldn't think that is large, but if you're going to fertilize, for example, this Catasetum orchid, you're not going to use this. Believe me, you'll kill it. You'll probably want to use something like the smallest size. It has 2 spoons on it. One is small, one is large. Put it in your water, and you're going to shake that water real well. It can also come in packages, which is more common, like this. Is that, for example, this one is 20-14-13, the NPK ratio. This one here is not. It's a 30-10-10. It's going to have a stronger nitrogen component to it. So if you want to know what nitrogen does to your orchid, go to orchideria.com and type in 5 fertilization methods. And before I explain each one on the website, I go into talking about what nitrogen does, what phosphorus does, and what potassium does. And for the sake of the video, I don't want to repeat all that. What are the pros of using this kind of method? Well, if you only have a few orchids and you grow them indoors like I do, this will last you a lifetime. You buy 1 bag, it's good. So it's relatively inexpensive. They do come with great directions. I mean, on both of their labels, they do have good directions. This one thing I forgot to mention, if you buy this one, the little spoon that comes inside does not have the 2, does not have, and this one is more blue than that one is, you can tell. This one does not have the other blue spoon on the end. So you only get this huge cup, which is way too much for a gallon. In my opinion. Every time I've used this amount that it says to use on the back, my orchids will turn yellow, the flower spike will turn yellow, the leaves will turn extremely yellow and fall off later, which is root burn, because the roots absorbed that water that was extremely fertilized and they couldn't handle it. The cons of this is that the measurements that they give, they say to put in a gallon of water. If you are just starting out as a beginner and you only have a few orchids, that is a lot of water. So do not get the temptation to use that water until it's all used up. Miracle Grow did address this problem. They actually replied and they said, I love it when they reply, they actually said that you can keep that water up to 2 weeks, that fertilized water up to 2 weeks in a shady place where it doesn't get sun. After 2 weeks, the fertilizer does lose its effect. Better Grow did not answer. That's the con of this method. You will have a lot of fertilized water left over as a beginner. Of course, once the addiction kicks in, this will not be a problem, believe me. One of the biggest complaints against this method is the constant root burn. The high concentrations of ammonia inside all of these brands will bring a slight smell to your room, and if used in the wrong proportions, the ones that they all suggest wrong proportions, will cause root burn. And then the root burn will quickly kill the roots of your orchids, so your orchids can't absorb water or any kind of nutrients, and they'll die. So one of the biggest complaints is that hey, I use this fertilizer, in 2 weeks my orchids are starting to die. That's because of the root burns, because of the concentration of the fertilizer was way too high. For the second method, misting. Now, misting is a completely different idea than to get your water and mix it with fertilizer. This is water that already has fertilizer in it. Now, the concentration of this is extremely tiny, 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 tiny. You're essentially paying for water with a tad bit of fertilizer. The first temptation we have is when we get a mister like this one, and we get an orchid, and I am so sorry, Orchid, this is for educational purposes only. You've been a good sport. I appreciate your sacrifice, is to do this. Poor little orchid. It's just, please don't do that. First, because if you have a Phalaenopsis orchid, the top of the leaves are somewhat hydro-repellent. So everything that falls on them is going to drip off. And it's made this way because in nature, when it rains, the water's going, well, of course, in nature, they're going to be sideways like that. So, well, this one would be like that. So the water is going to just run off the leaves so it doesn't sit on the leaves and cause crown rot or stem rot or wherever the water does stay. So what I did, in essence, I just misted the top of the leaves, and that is going to do not much for the orchid. When you mist, you want to hit the underside of the leaf. So you're going to aim from the bottom up and keep the leaf like that. Just a little bit is going to go a long way. And in this case, there's not much to start with anyway. Nowhere on here, at least on this brand, on this mister, nowhere on here does it have the concentration of NPK. I've asked and no answers, so you really don't know what you're putting on your orchid besides water. If you're wondering what nitrogen does, what phosphorus does, what potassium does, head over to the website, because there I explain each one of those on the exact same page where I explain the different methods of fertilizations. So for this, it becomes extremely expensive because in this little tiny bottle, I cannot mist all my orchids with this. I mean, it'd be done in a month. So the price becomes high, in my opinion, when you're using a mister like this one store-bought. If I were to mist my orchids and not use this, what I would do, I would use a soluble solution, and then I would use a mister and put that water in the mister and then mist everything. That would go a long way, and you still, oh no! I love you, cat. But we really got to talk about this. The pros of using a mister is that as a beginner orchid grower, it's hard to go wrong. So you're providing fertilizer, but it is extremely hard to over-fertilize. And over-fertilize is worse than not fertilizing at all. The good side is that it does not have any smell. It is odorless. Now look at this compared to this one, which is 30, 10, 10. 30.2, 10.2, 10.2. Look at how little you're actually using, which is good for a new orchid grower. I recommend as a beginner, start with this because it will get you into the habit of fertilizing. And once you get into the habit, then move on to others. If you have very few orchids, like 1, 2, 3, as a new grower, don't worry, your addiction will catch on. Have mercy of us plant collectors. But if you only have, like, let's say for the purpose of this video, 1 orchid, this will last about 4 months. So it is kind of expensive for what you're paying. The fourth method is plant spikes. Now, plant spikes, I made a mistake and I do not have any with me at the point of this video. They are little bitty sticks. They look like fortified toothpicks, actually. And you're going to stick them in the potting media, and their concentration is 10-10-10 usually. Usually, not all brands are the same, but you will find them in 10-10-10. These little plant spikes or sticks or whatever you want to call them, they will last 2 months only. So every 2 months you have to be replacing them. The good thing is that you do not have to remember to fertilize your orchids. The orchid fertilized stick is already in the pot, so you don't have to do anything else. The bad thing is that when you buy them, you'll usually buy a pack of 10. If they last 2 months each, you have roughly 2 years of fertilization for one orchid. This is where I do not like this method, because the amount of money you're going to spend to fertilize every single orchid, and the pros of this method is it is extremely effective because you do not have to remember to be fertilizing your orchid. Just every 2 months you go in and put a different spike in there. Every time you water, the spike is going to dissolve a little bit. This is actually the most time effective method because, I mean, how long does it take to insert a little stick into your potting media? Another con of this method is there is not really a way to flush out your orchid, because every 4th week, like you'll fertilize 3 weeks, and then the 4th week, if you're using something like this or a mister or anything else, you need to give it a break once in a while. Well, with a plant spike inside the potting media, you really can't do that. So you can't flush your orchid. You can't run running water over it to get rid of that salt buildup. That's a problem. Your orchid needs to rest. The 4th method is using slow release pellets, which is kind of like the other example of the slow release spikes. Now these pellets, and I'll open this bag for you, are good for certain types of orchids and others not. They usually last 6 months. Cat, please, Midnight, please do not turn these little pellets over. Stay down, girl. Oh. So these are the pellets. They're very tiny, and they release slowly over the potting media. They will last about 6 months, which is a lot longer than the spikes will. And you can put them, usually orchids that like these are catasetum orchids. So this one is in bloom, and I'll just show you real quick. You just put it on the side, and it's just a few, and you are done. Turn that way. Look how beautiful that is. I love catasetum orchids. Okay, and this is just a heads up. The pictures on the website where they show their orchids, they have huge balls, and it's a beautiful green. They look like little peas. The ones you actually get are extremely tiny. I don't think there's really much difference, in just because it's going to release at the same time, but just beware, because the first impressions usually stay along with us. Be prepared, they're small, but they are good. They are efficient, and you can use them every time you repot. The NPK concentration of this one is 14-10-10. So it is a good way to start if you're a beginner. Just put a few pellets in the pot when you repot, and see, like the catasetum do so well with it because they will be active for 6 months, and then during the dormancy you just leave them alone. You do not apply more, and then when you go to repot you add these. That's why they're so great with these. If you have a Phalaenopsis orchid, you can just put a few pellets on the side of the pot and add more pellets in the next 6 months. There isn't really cons with this method unless you really sprinkle your potting media and oversaturate your potting media with them. Because once they're in that media, unless you want to hand pick them out, they're staying there. The 5th method is a slow release liquid fertilizer, and all you need to do for this is snip open the top. At least this brand comes in 5 little packets, I guess you could call it, and you snip the tip and put it inside your orchid pot. Now, what could possibly go wrong with this? Now, I'm trying to be honest here. I'm not a physicist, but I do know that gravity pulls liquid down at a constant rate. How big a snip you're going to take, this could seep out in an hour. This could seep out in 2 minutes. This could seep out in a week. You have no control over how much fertilizer you're going to give your orchid. Now, I cannot imagine this lasting 2 months. And also, this is going to be dripping day and night, day and night. Gravity does not stop. Gravity is going to be pulling down this fertilizer constantly. Your roots are going to be soggy constantly. Don't need to say anymore. Another con, the price. You are getting 5 of these. There are 25 milliliters in each one of these. You only can use 1 for each orchid, obviously. So if you have 5 orchids, this will be good for a week. The second con, what's in here? I have no idea. Where on this package, where does it say what the NPK ratio is? It doesn't. Easy feeding for up to 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Your roots are going to be soggy constantly for 8 weeks. But what's in here? I mean, is it just pink water? If there are any brave souls out there who really want to actually use this, I have not gotten myself to. I mean, even on my guinea pig orchids, I cannot get myself to use this. I just can't. If you really want to buy it, you can go to my website. I did put an affiliate link there for all those people who are have an orchid they don't like. So, in my opinion, stay away from it. There are so many other methods that you can use. Just start out with a different method. Tell me in the comments below what method you use to fertilize your orchids, and if you have any other methods that I didn't explain in this video. In all of your fertilization methods, please, please, please take a break once a month so that your orchid can have time to just get flushed out and receive pure water that does not have any chemicals in it. If you have any questions about fertilization, go to the website at orchideria.com. If you subscribe to the website, you'll get a fertilization guide. Inside that fertilization guide, I will explain what nitrogen is, what phosphorus is, what calcium does, magnesium, how much to add, when you should fertilize, if you should fertilize in bloom or after. Should you stop fertilizing? Go over to the website at orchideria.com. You can get all this for free. I hope this video clarified any questions that you had about fertilizing. And if it did, please hit that like button. That is just a confirmation for me to know what videos are doing well and what videos I need to stay away from in the future. Head over to Orchideria, type orchideria.com, and fertilization. It should be one of the first that come up. Of course, there are other articles. There are so many articles on there about how to fertilize in pure sphagnum moss, how to fertilize in water culture, how to fertilize with eggshells, how to use tea bags to fertilize. So there is a wealth of information, and head over there. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments, because your question could be what someone else is asking too. Orchideria.com. I sure would appreciate it.